My name is Leah Foster, and I'm 42 years old. The day my husband walked out on me for choosing my dying father over my career, I thought I'd lost everything. He even brought his new girlfriend to the hospital to show me what ambition looks like. But sometimes, the universe has a way of revealing who truly deserves loyalty. What happened at my father's will reading didn't just change my bank account, it exposed truths that left an entire room speechless, including the CEO of my ex-husband's company. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is a story about discovering that sometimes losing someone is actually winning your life back. 2 years ago, I was a marketing director at a Fortune 500 company, pulling in six figures and climbing the corporate ladder. Then Dad's diagnosis came: stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave him 18 months if we were lucky. I'll never forget the moment I told Mark I was taking a leave of absence to care for Dad. He held my hand across our marble kitchen island and said, "We'll get through this together, babe." That support lasted exactly 3 weeks. "Your father has professional nurses, Leah," Mark said one evening, scrolling through his phone while I researched treatment options. This martyrdom thing isn't attractive. What Mark didn't understand, or didn't care to understand, was that Dad wasn't just any patient. Robert Miller had built his real estate empire from nothing, raised me alone after Mom died, and never missed a single school play or graduation. Now he needed me, and nurses couldn't provide what he really needed: his daughter's presence during the hardest battle of his life. I reduced my hours first, then went part-time, finally taking indefinite leave. Each step down the career ladder corresponded with a step back from Mark. He stopped asking about Dad's treatments. Client dinners suddenly required overnight stays. His family started making comments at Sunday dinners. "Such a shame about your career," his mother would say, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. "Mark needs a partner who matches his ambition." The truth I didn't know then: Dad had been CEO of one of the largest real estate development firms in Manhattan before retiring. He'd kept his wealth quiet, living modestly in Queens, teaching me the value of hard work over inheritance. But Mark never knew the full extent of Dad's success. He only saw an old man draining his wife's potential. The financial control started subtly. Mark moved our joint savings to a high-yield account that required both signatures for withdrawals. Then he got concerned about our spending and put me on a monthly allowance. "Just until you're working again," he assured me. I discovered the depth of his resentment the day I asked for extra money for Dad's prescriptions. Insurance didn't cover the experimental medication his oncologist recommended. $3,000? Mark's voice carried across the Whole Foods parking lot. "For pills that probably won't even work? It could give him more time. Your father has Medicare. Why should I fund his medical experiments when he never even liked me anyway?" That stung because it was partially true. Dad had always been polite to Mark but never warm. "He sees through facades," Dad once told me. I'd laughed it off then. Mark started coming home later, his clothes carrying unfamiliar perfume. "Networking events," he'd say, tossing his keys on the counter without looking at me. His phone, once casually left anywhere, never left his side. When it buzzed during dinner, he'd step out to answer, claiming urgent work calls. One night, while he showered, a text preview lit up his screen. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Jay." I sat there, staring at that kiss emoji, feeling something inside me break. Not my heart. That had been fracturing for months. It was the last thread of denial snapping. My husband wasn't just unsupportive. He was already moving on while I was still technically in the picture. The next morning, Mark opened a separate bank account. For business expenses, he explained, though his company had always direct deposited his bonuses into our joint account before. Jessica Williams had 47,000 Instagram followers and a bio that read, "Living my best life, entrepreneur and lifestyle curator." Her feed was a carefully orchestrated display of morning lattes, yoga poses, and motivational quotes about removing toxic people and elevating your circle. I found her through Mark's tagged photos. He'd been careful not to post her himself, but her friends weren't as discreet. There he was at a rooftop bar in Tribeca, his arm around her tiny waist, both holding champagne flutes. The caption, "Power couples who hustle together, thrive together, at Mark Foster, at Jess Williams, YC, ambitious, no excuses." The date stamp showed 3 weeks ago, when I'd been sleeping on a hospital cot because Dad had a bad reaction to chemotherapy. Mark's LinkedIn activity told another story. He'd been commenting on every post Jessica made about cutting dead weight and surrounding yourself with winners. His own posts had shifted from market analyses to philosophical musings about the importance of partnering with someone who shares your vision. Our mutual friend started reaching out with careful messages. "Just wanted to check if you're okay. Saw something online, thought you should know." Sarah from my old team finally sent me screenshots from the company happy hour. Mark had actually told people I'd given up on life and that he couldn't be with someone without ambition or drive. "She chose to be a full-time nurse to her father," he'd said, 3 martinis in, Jessica draped on his shoulder. "I need a partner, not a charity worker." The irony? While I was supposedly giving up on life, I was learning more about strength, sacrifice, and real love than I'd ever known in our 8-year marriage. But Mark couldn't see that. He only saw opportunities slipping away, opportunities he'd later discover were never his to claim. The divorce papers arrived at the hospital. Mark had them delivered by courier, right to Dad's oncology ward. The nurse handed them to me with sympathetic eyes while I was adjusting Dad's IV drip. "He wants the house," I told Dad, scanning the document. "Plus half of my 401k, even though I'm not working. He's keeping his bonuses from the last 2 years because they're earned income from his sole efforts." Dad's eyes, though dimmed by medication, sharpened with anger. "That bastard! I can't afford a lawyer, Dad. Not a good one. And I can't fight this while—" I gestured at the medical equipment surrounding us. "Sweetheart," Dad said, his voice raspy but determined. "Don't worry about the future. I've taken care of everything." I thought he meant his funeral arrangements. We'd already discussed cremation, the memorial service at his old church. I had no idea he was talking about something else entirely. Mark's timeline was aggressive. Sign within 30 days or he'd file for abandonment. "You abandoned our marriage for your father," his lawyer's letter stated. "Mr. Foster has been more than patient." Patient? While I was learning to administer IV medications, tracking Dad's white blood cell counts, and sleeping in hospital chairs, Mark had been planning his exit strategy. He'd already moved half our furniture to a new apartment, one Jessica was decorating according to her Instagram stories. The financial squeeze was deliberate. Without access to our joint accounts, I was burning through my personal savings on Dad's medications, special foods, and equipment rentals. Medicare covered the basics, but comfort, dignity, those cost extra. "Let him have it all," Dad whispered one evening, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Material things can be replaced. Time with family can't. You're making the right choice, Leah. Trust me on this." Mark chose a Tuesday afternoon to stage his cruelest performance. He arrived at the hospital with his lawyer, Brandon something or other, carrying a leather portfolio like they were closing a business deal. Jessica waited in the hallway, visible through the glass door, scrolling through her phone in a designer dress. "Sign it now, Leah," Mark said, spreading the papers on Dad's bedside table, right next to his water pitcher and medication chart. "Stop being dramatic. This is what's best for everyone." Dad's eyes were closed, but I saw his heart rate spike on the monitor. "Could we do this somewhere else?" I asked. "Why? You live here now anyway." Mark's laugh was sharp. "Brandon has another appointment in an hour. Just sign." Brandon, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We could step outside." "No need," Mark interrupted. "Her father's sedated. Right, Robert?" That's when Dad's eyes opened. He looked directly at Mark, then at Jessica preening in the hallway, then at me. "Leah, call Thomas Brennan," he said clearly. "Who?" Mark demanded. Dad closed his eyes again. My lawyer. Speed dial 3 on my phone. The room went silent, except for the steady beep of monitors. Mark's face shifted through several expressions: confusion, calculation, then dismissal. Bluffing won't help her, he told Brandon. But I saw the flicker of uncertainty. Within an hour, Thomas Brennan arrived, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, carrying a presence that made Brandon step back. Mr. Miller, he said warmly to Dad, then turned to Mark with cool professionalism. Mr. Foster, I understand you're pressuring my client's daughter during a medical crisis. That stops now. Mark left, but not before Jessica popped in to suggest a nice hospice facility she'd researched. Some daughters know when to let professionals take over, she said sweetly. Dad's monitor beeped faster. I held his hand and said nothing. If you've ever been told your sacrifices don't matter, or that caring for family makes you weak, please hit that like button. Your support means everything, and it helps other people who need to hear this story find it. Also, comment below. Have you ever had someone underestimate your worth only to regret it later? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me. Now let me tell you what happened when Jessica decided to visit my father again, this time with her own agenda. Jessica arrived the next week with a PowerPoint presentation on her iPad. I'm not joking. She actually created slides about transitioning Robert to professional care. I've researched the top facilities, she announced, setting up her tablet on Dad's tray table while he was trying to eat lunch. This one in Newark has excellent reviews and accepts Medicare. Newark? I said. That's 2 hours away. Exactly. Far enough that you won't feel obligated to visit daily. She swiped to a slide showing costs. Mark and I have already discussed the finances. Dad put down his spoon. His hands were shaking, from rage, not weakness. Young lady, he said slowly, what makes you think you have any say in my care? Jessica laughed, that tinkling fake sound influencer's perfect for videos. Well, I'm practically family now. Mark and I are planning our future, and Leah clearly needs guidance. Get out, Dad's voice was steel. Robert, you're emotional. This is why families need objective input. I said get out. The entire ward heard him. Nurses stopped in the hallway. Dr. Patterson, Dad's oncologist, appeared in the doorway. Is everything all right, Mr. Miller? She asked, looking pointedly at Jessica. This woman is harassing my patient, Dad said clearly. Please have security escort her out. Jessica's face went red. I was trying to help. Some people actually care about being productive instead of wallowing in... Ma'am, Dr. Patterson interrupted. You need to leave, now. As security arrived, Jessica hissed at me. You're going to die alone, just like him. Dr. Patterson made a note in her chart. Later, I learned she documented the incident in detail, describing it as attempted elder abuse through coercion. That documentation would matter more than any of us knew at the time. Mark escalated things by posting on LinkedIn. Sometimes life teaches you hard lessons about choosing partners who share your growth mindset. Watching someone you love give up on their potential is heartbreaking. #growth mindset, #difficult choices. Within hours, it had 300 reactions and dozens of comments. His colleagues chimed in with supportive platitudes. Jessica hearted it and commented, "So proud of you for choosing your truth." But then something unexpected happened. Sarah Chen from my old team commented, "Interesting take, Mark. Isn't Leah caring for her dying father? That sounds like strength, not giving up." The thread exploded. Former colleagues who'd been silent started sharing their own stories about caregiving. My old boss, Patricia Williams, wrote, Leah Foster was one of the strongest leaders I've worked with. Caring for family doesn't diminish that. Mark tried damage control, posting about misunderstandings and private matters, but screenshots were already circulating. Someone found Jessica's Instagram stories from the hospital, including one where she'd filmed herself outside Dad's room with the caption, "Visiting the elderly," and charity and good vibes. The head of HR at Mark's firm, Jennifer Rodriguez, called me personally. "Leah, I'm sorry to bother you during this difficult time. We've received some concerning reports about Mark's behavior. Would you be willing to document any incidents?" I hesitated, then forwarded her the security report from the hospital and the divorce papers he'd tried to make me sign in Dad's room. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Take care of yourself and your father." That evening, Dad squeezed my hand. "You have more support than you know, sweetheart. People see truth, even when it's hidden behind expensive suits and motivational quotes." His words would prove prophetic in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I signed the divorce papers on a Thursday. Dad was having a good day, alert, minimal pain, able to sit up and eat solid food. Thomas Brennan reviewed the documents with me first. "You're giving him everything," Thomas said bluntly. "The house, the investments, most of the liquid assets." "I just want peace," I replied, "for whatever time Dad has left." "Your father disagrees with this decision, but he respects it." Thomas made notes on his legal pad. "However, I need you to understand. Mark is taking advantage of your situation." "I know." I signed my name with steady hands. "But fighting him means depositions, court dates, mediations. I can't do that and be here for Dad." Mark had won, or so he thought. He got the Brooklyn townhouse we'd renovated together, our investment portfolio, even my grandmother's dining room set. I kept my clothes, my car, and my personal savings account with barely $5,000. When I told Dad it was done, he cried. It was the first time I'd seen him cry since Mom's funeral 20 years ago. "You deserved better," he whispered. "I have what matters," I said, holding his weathered hand. "I have time with you." "The best investment I ever made was in you, sweetheart." His eyes held something I couldn't quite read, sadness mixed with something else. "Satisfaction?" "You'll be okay. Trust me." That night, Thomas Brennan visited again. He and Dad talked privately for 2 hours. When he left, Dad seemed lighter somehow, almost peaceful. "It's all arranged," Dad told me. "Everything is exactly as it should be." I assumed he meant his funeral plans. We'd already picked out his burial plot next to Mom. I had no idea he was orchestrating something far more elaborate. A final lesson in justice that would be delivered with perfect timing. Thomas Brennan became a regular visitor in Dad's final weeks. He brought different documents each time, always in sealed folders, always requiring Dad's signature in front of witnesses. The nurses started joking about Dad running his empire from bed 7. "Your father is a smart man," Thomas told me one afternoon while Dad dozed. "One of the smartest I've represented." "He was a great CEO," I agreed. "Is," Thomas corrected. "He is a great CEO. Retirement doesn't diminish what someone built." I didn't understand the emphasis then. Dad had sold his company 5 years ago, keeping only a small consulting role. Or so I'd thought. "Leah," Dad said one evening, more alert than he'd been in days, "I need you to know something about my portfolio." "Dad, we don't have to talk about—" "Listen." His voice was firm. "I've been investing since before you were born. Real estate, tech stocks, index funds. Compound interest is a beautiful thing." "Okay, Dad." "The Manhattan property alone." He drifted off, then snapped back. "Never told Mark about everything. Some things are better kept quiet until the right moment." A notary public came twice. A videographer once, setting up professional equipment for what Dad called a message for later. He made me leave the room for that recording. "Privacy matters," he said when I protested. "Even from you, sweetheart." The day before he passed, Dad had one final visitor, Richard Blackstone, CEO of Mark's company. They'd been friends for 40 years, something Mark never knew. Richard held Dad's hand and promised, "I'll keep an eye on things, Robert." "I'm counting on it," Dad replied. Everything felt orchestrated, but I was too exhausted and grief-stricken to piece it together. The puzzle would only reveal itself at the reading of the will. Never told Mark about everything. Dad's words echoed as I sorted through his papers after the funeral. Mark hadn't attended. He sent a bouquet with a generic card from his assistant. Jessica posted about the circle of life with a sunset photo. Dad's filing cabinet revealed glimpses of a financial life I'd never fully understood. Quarterly statements from investment accounts, property deeds, a folder marked Manhattan Holdings, containing documents about a building on the Upper East Side. Your father was very private about his wealth, Thomas Brennan explained when I called him, confused. He believed in living modestly and teaching value through example, not inheritance. But Mark always said Dad was comfortable, not wealthy. Mark saw what your father wanted him to see. Thomas's tone was carefully neutral. Your father observed that Mark had strong opinions about money and family wealth during your early dating days. I remembered now, Mark's rants about trust fund babies, his pride in being self-made, his contempt for people who inherited rather than earned. Dad had listened to those speeches at family dinners, nodding politely, never mentioning his own substantial assets. The full estate will be detailed at the reading, Thomas continued. Your father requested both families be present. He was very specific about the attendee list. Both families? But Mark and I are divorced now. Your father's will was finalized 3 days before he passed. He was quite aware of your marital status. Thomas paused. He also insisted Mr. Foster be personally invited. Said it was important for closure. The way he said closure made me shiver. Dad had been planning something. All those documents, the video recording, the careful timing. He'd orchestrated his final move while everyone thought he was just a dying old man. 3 days before Dad passed, Mark organized what he called a farewell visit with his team from the office. 15 people showed up at the hospice ward, treating it like a corporate field trip. Mark played the devoted almost son-in-law, even though our divorce had been finalized for 2 weeks. This is Leah, he announced to his younger colleagues, Robert's daughter. She's been here full-time. It's been challenging for everyone. The subtext was clear. Look at what I've had to deal with. Jessica stood beside him in a black dress, as if she'd already attended the funeral. It's so important to say goodbye, she said loudly, filming herself for her stories. Closure is everything. Richard Blackstone, the CEO, stood apart from the group, watching Mark's performance with an unreadable expression. He approached Dad's bed separately, leaning down to whisper something I couldn't hear. Dad's eyes flickered open, and he nodded once. Leah's made sacrifices, Mark continued his speech. Sometimes people choose family over career. It's admirable, really, even if it's not the choice everyone would make. Not the choice a smart person would make, Jessica added, not quite sotto voce. Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway. This is a hospice ward, not a conference room. 5 visitors maximum, please. As the group dispersed, Mark made one final performance. Robert, you've been like a father to me. I'm sorry it's ending this way. Dad's eyes opened fully. He looked at Mark for a long moment, then spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. Endings reveal character, Mark. Remember that. Richard Blackstone nodded slowly, making a note in his phone. The younger employees exchanged glances. Jessica tugged Mark's arm, but the damage was done. Dad had marked him, publicly, with those 5 words. Dad passed on a quiet Sunday morning, just as the sun painted his hospital room gold. I was holding his hand, reading him the sports section even though he hadn't responded in 2 days. The Mets won again, I said. You would have loved that. His breathing changed, lighter somehow. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on my face with sudden clarity. Leah. His voice was barely a whisper. You were worth everything. Every sacrifice. Every hard choice. You were worth it all. Dad, save your strength. No. His grip tightened. Need you to know. What's coming It's all for you. You chose love over money. That's real wealth. I love you, Dad. Your mother would be so proud. I'm proud. His eyes shifted to something beyond me, and he smiled. Helen. Mom's name was his last word. His hand relaxed in mine as the monitors sang their final song. I sat with him for an hour before calling the nurses. In that quiet space, I felt the weight of 8 years lift. Every night in a hospital chair, every career opportunity missed, every cruel word from Mark. None of it mattered against the privilege of being there when Dad needed me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. My condolences. Let me know about arrangements. Then 3 minutes later, another. Will there be a will reading? I turned off my phone and held Dad's still warm hand. Outside, the world continued its Sunday morning routine. Inside, I said goodbye to the man who taught me that love isn't measured in dollars or career achievements, but in showing up when it matters. Thomas Brennan's message came that evening. Your father's instructions were clear. Will reading in 2 weeks. Both families must attend. He said you'd understand why. The law offices of Brennan and Associates occupied the 40th floor of a Manhattan high-rise, all glass and gravitas. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing the black dress I'd bought for Dad's funeral. Simple, dignified, appropriate. Mark arrived with an entourage, Jessica in designer sunglasses despite the gray day, his brother Dennis, his mother Margaret, and Brandon, his divorce lawyer. They swept in like they owned the place. Leah, Margaret acknowledged me with a curt nod. This must be difficult. Thank you for coming, I replied, noting how Jessica was already calculating the office's worth. Thomas Brennan's assistant escorted us to a conference room dominated by a mahogany table and a large wall-mounted television. Documents lay at each seat, held shut with official seals. Interesting setup for a simple will reading, Mark commented, taking a seat directly across from me. Seems excessive for a modest estate. Thomas entered precisely at 10, followed by 2 assistants and, surprisingly, Richard Blackstone. Richard? Mark stood, confused. What are you doing here? Your father-in-law invited me, Richard replied, choosing a seat near the door. He said it would be educational. Thomas cleared his throat. Before we begin, I need to confirm all required parties are present. He read from a list: immediate family, ex-spouses who were married during the final illness, and, he looked at Jessica, any parties who attempted to influence Mr. Miller's care decisions. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. I don't see why You're named specifically, Ms. Williams. Mr. Miller was quite thorough. The assistant powered on the television and opened a laptop. The screen showed a paused video, Dad in his hospital bed, alert and formal, wearing his navy suit jacket over his hospital gown. Shall we begin? Thomas asked, his finger hovering over the play button. Before we get to the will reading, I want to thank you for staying with me through this story. If you've ever felt invisible for doing the right thing, please subscribe and ring the notification bell. I post new stories every week about real people standing up for themselves. Quick question. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have signed those divorce papers? Let me know in the comments. Now, here's where everything changed. Thomas Brennan adjusted his glasses and began reading from the official document. The last will and testament of Robert James Miller, executed on the 15th of this month, 3 days prior to his passing. 3 days? Mark interrupted. He was barely conscious 3 days before. Mr. Miller was fully lucid during the signing, with 2 doctors and a judge present as witnesses. Thomas continued smoothly. Now, as to the disposition of assets. He paused, looking directly at me. To my daughter, Leah Foster, I leave the following: cash and liquid assets totaling $3.2 million. The room went silent. Jessica's mouth fell open. Mark's face drained of color. That's impossible, Mark said. Robert was comfortable but not. The residential property located at 1247 Park Avenue, Manhattan, valued at $2.1 million. Margaret Foster gasped. Park Avenue? An investment portfolio containing stocks, bonds, and index funds, current value $800,000. There must be a mistake, Mark stood up. Robert never mentioned. There's no mistake, Mr. Foster. Thomas's voice was steel. Mr. Miller was very careful about his privacy. He also included specific conditions regarding these assets. Dennis leaned forward. What conditions? Thomas read directly from the document. These assets are designated as separate property, immune from any marital claims, past, present, or future. Should my daughter reconcile with her ex-husband, Mark Foster, these assets remain solely hers, protected by an irrevocable trust that cannot be dissolved or shared. Brandon, Mark's lawyer, was frantically checking his phone. That's ironclad. Even if they remarried, Mark couldn't touch a penny. To my daughter Leah, who chose love over convenience, who sacrificed her career for family, who showed me what real wealth means, you deserve everything. Thomas looked up. There's also a video message. Before we play the video, Thomas continued, there are additional provisions I must read. He turned the page deliberately. Regarding Mark Foster, who was married to my daughter during my final illness. Mark straightened, a flicker of hope crossing his face. To Mark Foster, I leave the sum of $1 to be donated in his name to the American Cancer Society with the following message. This represents the value you placed on family loyalty. Jessica snorted, then covered her mouth. Margaret Foster went rigid. Furthermore, Thomas continued, I have established that any attempt by Mr. Foster to contest this, will or pursue claims against my daughter's inheritance, will trigger the release of certain documented evidence to relevant parties, including his employer. Richard Blackstone shifted in his seat, watching Mark intently. What evidence? Mark demanded. This is blackmail. It's protection, Mr. Foster. Your conversations in Mr. Miller's hospital room were recorded with his consent, as Maryland is a one-party consent state for recordings. Your statements about waiting for the old man to die and your financial motivations are well documented. Mark's lawyer, Brandon, was sweating. Mark, we need to discuss. Shut up, Mark snapped. This is ridiculous. The divorce is final. I don't want anything from her father. Interesting, Thomas said mildly, because you texted my client 12 times in the past week asking about the will reading. But let's proceed. There's one more provision. He looked at Jessica. To Jessica Williams, who suggested my daughter abandon me for professional care and who filmed content in my hospital room for social media, I leave this message. Compassion is not content. Families are not photo opportunities. May you learn this before it's too late. Jessica's face burned red. I was trying to help. The video will clarify Mr. Miller's feelings about your help, Thomas said, reaching for the remote. Dad appeared on screen, propped up in his hospital bed but alert, wearing his navy suit jacket. The date stamp showed 3 days before his death. If you're watching this, I'm gone, and you're all gathered to hear what I've left behind. His voice was clear, stronger than it had been in weeks. Leah, my darling daughter, you already know what I'm leaving you, but they don't know why. He paused, eyes moving as if seeing the room where we now sat. Mark Foster, you're probably calculating what you've lost. $3.2 million in cash, a Manhattan property, an investment portfolio. You threw it all away the day you told my daughter she was wasting her life on a dying man. Mark's face went white. Jessica grabbed his arm. Yes, I heard you. Every word. You stood in my room thinking I was unconscious, and told Jessica that when I died, it would be payday. You said Leah's inheritance would make up for the lost years of her career. Richard Blackstone was typing notes rapidly. You revealed your character, Mark. You saw my daughter's love as weakness. You saw my illness as an opportunity. But here's what you missed. I was never unconscious. I heard everything. Your plans to put me in a cheap facility, your girlfriend's suggestions about professional care, your complaints about the money Leah spent on my medications. Dad leaned forward slightly. I built my fortune through decades of smart decisions. Keeping you away from it, that was my smartest one. The video continued. Richard, my old friend, you're witnessing this for a reason. A man who abandons family during crisis will abandon anyone. Consider that in your professional decisions. Mark stood abruptly. This is defamation. I'll sue. Sit down, Mark, Richard said quietly. You're done. Mark's composure shattered completely. He dropped to his knees in front of me, right there in the conference room, grabbing for my hands. Leah, please, we can work this out. The divorce was a mistake. I love you. Jessica stood up so fast her chair tipped over. Are you serious right now? Shut up, Mark snarled at her, then turned back to me with desperate eyes. Leah, honey, we had 8 good years. This is just a rough patch. We can go to counseling. We can… Mark. Margaret Foster's voice cut through his rambling. Stop embarrassing yourself. Mom, you don't understand. $3 million. The apartment. We could… We? I finally spoke, pulling my hands away. There is no we, Mark. You made that clear when you brought your girlfriend to mock me at my father's deathbed. Richard Blackstone stood. Mark, I need to see you in my office tomorrow morning, 9 sharp. The implications were clear. Mark's face crumbled as he realized his professional life was about to implode along with his personal one. Jessica grabbed her purse. You told me she was nothing. You said she was a washed-up housewife playing nurse. She looked at me. He said you were pathetic, that you'd thrown your life away for nothing. And yet here we are, Thomas Brennan observed mildly. Ms. Foster inherited millions, and Mr. Foster is on his knees begging for forgiveness. Interesting how things reveal themselves. Dennis tried to help Mark stand, but he shrugged him off, making one last attempt. Leah, I made mistakes, but… The divorce papers were finalized 2 weeks ago, I said quietly. And Dad made sure you can never touch his money, even if I lost my mind and took you back. Which, of course, would never happen. I stood slowly, gathering my purse and the folder Thomas had given me containing Dad's letters, personal messages he'd written for me to read later, in private. The room was absolutely silent, except for Mark's ragged breathing as he remained on his knees. Thank you, Thomas, I said, shaking the lawyer's hand. You've executed my father's wishes perfectly. It was an honor, Ms. Foster. Your father was very specific about ensuring you were protected. He handed me a business card. My personal cell. If Mr. Foster attempts any contact that makes you uncomfortable, call immediately. I turned to Richard Blackstone. Thank you for coming. Dad always spoke highly of you. Your father was a great man, Richard replied, then looked down at Mark with undisguised contempt. He understood that character is revealed in how we treat people when they're vulnerable. Margaret Foster stood as I passed. Leah, I didn't know how he was treating you. I'm sorry. I nodded but didn't stop. There would be time for those conversations later, maybe, if they mattered. At the door, I turned back one final time. Mark was still on the floor, Jessica was gone, and the rest of his family sat in stunned silence. My father taught me that dignity isn't negotiable, I said. He also taught me that the best response to disrespect is success. Thank you all for coming. I walked out with my head high, my father's voice echoing in my memory. You were worth everything. In the elevator, I finally let the tears fall, not from sadness, but from relief. Dad had protected me even in death, ensuring that the people who'd dismissed my sacrifice would witness my vindication. The security guard nodded as I passed. Have a good day, Miss Foster. You know, I said, I really think I will. The news traveled through Mark's industry like wildfire. Richard Blackstone, true to his word, had taken action. Within a week, Mark was called into a series of meetings with HR about professional conduct concerns and representation of company values. Sarah Chen, my former colleague, called me with updates. He's been removed from the Peterson account, she said. Apparently, Richard played the video from your dad's will reading at the partners' meeting. The part where Mark talked about payday when the old man dies. The promotion Mark had been guaranteed for 2 years went to someone else. His corner office was reassigned. He was moved to a different division, internal auditing, a dead end for someone with his ambitions. Jessica, meanwhile, had gone scorched earth on social media. She posted a series of videos about narcissistic manipulation and dating men who hide their true character. The comments section became a battlefield of people who knew the real story versus her followers. Someone leaked the security footage of her being escorted from Dad's hospital room. Her follower count dropped by 15,000 in 3 days. "She's claiming she was deceived," Sarah told me during another call. "But everyone saw her Instagram posts from your dad's hospital. The one where she posed with a peace sign outside his room? That went viral for all the wrong reasons." Mark tried to salvage his reputation with a LinkedIn post about learning from life's challenges and growing through adversity. The comments were brutal. Someone posted, "Is this the same guy who divorced his wife for caring for her dying father?" By month's end, Mark had been quietly encouraged to explore opportunities elsewhere. His departure was announced in a single line in the company newsletter. No farewell party, no glowing recommendations, just gone. "I used Dad's inheritance exactly as he would have wanted, strategically and with purpose. The first thing I did was establish the Robert Miller Foundation for Family Caregivers, providing financial support to people who sacrifice careers to care for loved ones. Then I launched my own consulting firm, Foster Strategic Marketing. My first client? Patricia Williams, my former boss, who'd left corporate to start her own venture. I always wanted to poach you from that company," she said. "Now I can actually afford you." Within 6 months, I had 12 clients and needed to hire help. I reached out to colleagues who'd been laid off or pushed out, talented people Mark had dismissed as not ambitious enough. We built something extraordinary together, a company that valued both excellence and humanity. The Manhattan apartment became my office and sanctuary. Dad had bought it in 1995, a 2-bedroom overlooking Central Park. I found photos in his desk of him and Mom there, young and laughing, from before I was born. He'd kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment to pass it on. "Your father was playing a long game," Thomas Brennan told me over coffee. He knew Mark's character from the beginning. The will was structured years ago, just updated with recent events. I discovered Dad had been secretly paying for several employees' cancer treatments through anonymous donations. His oncologist, Dr. Patterson, told me he'd funded an entire research grant. "He said watching you care for him inspired him to care for others," she explained. The foundation's first gala raised $200,000. I spoke about Dad, about choosing love over ambition, about how caregiving isn't giving up, it's showing up. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Mark wasn't invited, but I heard he watched the live stream. Someone saw him crying at his desk. A year later, I ran into Dennis, Mark's brother, at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He looked exhausted, older. "Leah," he said hesitantly, "I've been wanting to apologize. We all knew what Mark was doing was wrong. We should have said something." "How is he?" I asked, not from concern, but curiosity. Dennis shrugged. "He's working at a small firm in Jersey, makes a third of what he used to, lives in a studio apartment in Queens." He paused. "He kept the divorce papers you signed, has them framed like some sort of shrine to his stupidity." "And Jessica?" "Gone within a week of the will reading. Posted some final Instagram rant about fake wealthy people before she blocked him everywhere." Dennis actually smiled. "She's dating some crypto guy now. Posted about upgrading to first class." Mark had tried online dating, Dennis continued, but someone always recognized him. A Reddit thread titled "Remember the guy who divorced his wife for caring for her dying dad?" had gone viral. Screenshots from the thread appeared whenever someone Googled his name. "He applied to your foundation," Dennis said quietly, "for a job, not a grant. Used a different email, but Patricia recognized his writing style." I wasn't surprised. Mark had always been good at presentations, but terrible at disguising his voice. "What position?" Marketing coordinator, entry level. Dennis laughed bitterly. From VP at a Fortune 500 to begging for entry-level work at his ex-wife's company. Mom says it's karma. She's been volunteering at cancer wards since your dad's funeral. Says she needs to atone for raising such a selfish son. I finished my coffee and stood to leave. Tell Margaret her volunteer work matters. Dad would have appreciated that. And Mark? Mark made his choices. Now he lives with them. 2 years after Dad's passing, I stood in his favorite spot in Central Park, watching the sunrise paint the reservoir gold. I'd run there that morning, something I'd started doing again now that life had rhythm and peace. The journey from those dark hospital nights to here felt like a lifetime. I'd learned that grief and gratitude could coexist, that losing someone who didn't value you really was winning your life back, just as Dad had promised. My company had grown to 20 employees. We'd just landed a contract with Mount Sinai's patient advocacy program, helping them communicate with families going through what I'd experienced. Full circle in the best way. Thomas Brennan had become a friend, joining our foundation's board. "Your father would be so proud," he said at our last meeting. "You took his final gift and multiplied it with purpose." I'd also found love again, unexpected and gentle, with David, a pediatric surgeon who volunteered at our foundation events. He understood sacrifice and service. He'd held my hand when I ugly cried on Dad's birthday, and he'd celebrated when we funded our 100th caregiver grant. "Your dad taught you that money isn't wealth," David said one evening as we watched the sunset from the apartment. "Real wealth is being valued correctly by people who matter." He was right. Dad's greatest gift wasn't the millions or the apartment or even the public vindication. It was showing me my worth when someone I'd loved had tried to convince me I was worthless. The foundation's motto, inscribed on every document, came from Dad's last words to me. "You were worth everything." We'd helped 300 families so far, people choosing love over convenience, care over career, presence over profit. Mark had taught me what love wasn't. Dad had shown me what it was. Last month, Mark sent a letter through Thomas Brennan's office. 10 pages, handwritten, begging for forgiveness and a second chance. "I understand now what I lost," he wrote. "Not the money, you." I read it once, then filed it with the other attempts he'd made to contact me. No response needed. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. Jessica had reinvented herself as a wellness coach, specializing in toxic relationship recovery. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the real story. She'd tried to attend one of our foundation galas, presumably for content. Security politely redirected her to the exit. Margaret Foster became one of our most dedicated volunteers. She never asked about Mark during our interactions, just showed up and worked. Once, she said quietly, "I failed as a mother. Let me succeed as a human being." I respected that. The apartment where Dad spent his final months was now a hospice suite named in his honor. I donated funds to renovate it, making it a space where families could find dignity in their darkest moments. A plaque by the door read, "Love is not measured in time, but in presence." My life had become everything Mark said I was throwing away: successful, meaningful, abundant. But it was built on the foundation of choosing love when it mattered most, not abandoning it when it got hard. I learned that losing someone who doesn't value you is actually winning, I tell the caregivers at our support groups. My father's death taught me about life. My husband's betrayal taught me about worth. Both lessons were expensive, but only one cost me everything. Tomorrow, I'm speaking at Columbia's Business School about ethical leadership. The title of my talk? The ROI of Loyalty, A Daughter's Story. Mark won't be invited to that either. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're caring for a loved one right now and feeling unseen, please know that your sacrifice matters more than any career achievement. You're not wasting your life, you're living it with purpose. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. What's the most important lesson about loyalty you've learned? I read every comment, and your stories help build this amazing community. Remember, the people who truly love you will never make you choose between them and your family. See you in the next video.